The city was already awake when Ava Williams stepped out of her small apartment that morning. The streets of Chicago buzzed with honking horns, the chatter of commuters, and the heavy rhythm of a city that never slowed down. But for Ava, the world felt strangely quiet. Her heart was racing too loud for her to notice anything else. She stood for a moment on the cracked pavement, clutching her modest leather bag tightly, her fingers trembling just slightly. Today wasn't just another day. Today was the beginning of something new. Something bigger. Ava was 27 years old, tall and graceful, with a quiet strength in her presence. Her dark brown skin seemed to glow in the morning light, her natural curls pinned neatly into a bun, and her outfit, a simple navy blouse tucked into tailored slacks, spoke of someone who valued both dignity and humility. She wasn't dressed to impress, she was dressed to belong. And yet, even as she walked toward the glass tower of Sterling Enterprises, one of the city's most powerful firms, she knew belonging wouldn't come easy. She whispered to herself, steadying her nerves. "You've worked hard for this. You deserve to be here." But the truth was, Ava had a secret. To everyone else, she was just a new administrative assistant, freshly hired to prove herself. But beneath that quiet facade, Ava was much more. She was the daughter of Jonathan Sterling, the very owner and founder of Sterling Enterprises, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms across the country. Yet few people knew he had a daughter working in the company. And fewer still would have ever guessed that she chose to start at the bottom, blending in with the employees rather than stepping straight into the luxury of a leadership role. For Ava, this wasn't about privilege. It was about purpose. She wanted to understand what the workers really faced. To see, with her own eyes, what life was like away from the boardroom's polished mahogany table. But she also knew that if anyone discovered her identity too soon, everything would change. People wouldn't treat her the same. The truth would cloud every relationship, every word, every smile. So she kept it hidden. The Sterling building loomed high above her, all glass and steel, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Inside, the lobby buzzed with workers moving swiftly through security gates. Men in pressed suits, women in sharp heels, interns clutching coffee trays, all of them swept up in the current of corporate life. Ava stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She approached the front desk, gave her name, and was issued a temporary badge. The receptionist glanced at her, offered a polite but distracted smile, and waved her through. But the real test awaited her upstairs. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 15th floor, operations, the beating heart of the company. The doors slid open, revealing a sea of cubicles, glass-walled offices, and the ever-present hum of phones, printers, and hushed conversations. Ava stepped out, clutching her bag. Almost immediately, she felt it. The stares, subtle at first, then sharper. Some employees looked her up and down, whispering behind their hands. Others simply frowned, as if her very presence was an intrusion. She ignored it, forcing a gentle smile, and walked toward the front desk. A young woman sat there, typing furiously. She didn't even glance up when Ava spoke. "Good morning, I'm Ava Williams. Today's my first day." The receptionist sighed, barely looking at her, and handed her a stack of forms. "Fill these out. Wait over there. Mr. Carter will come for you." Ava nodded politely, though she felt the sting of dismissal. She moved to a chair in the corner, filling out the papers quietly. It wasn't long before she met him. Daniel Carter, the operations manager, mid-40s, a man with graying temples, an expensive suit, and a face carved into a permanent smirk. Carter wasn't just a boss, he was the kind of man who believed his authority was untouchable. The kind of man who measured people by how much they could serve his ego. And from the moment his eyes landed on Ava, he decided exactly where she stood. He strode across the floor, his voice booming so everyone could hear. "So you're the new hire?" Ava rose to her feet, extending a hand politely. "Yes, sir, Ava Williams. It's a pleasure to meet you." Carter didn't shake her hand. He simply looked her up and down, eyes narrowing. "Williams, huh? All right. Let's make one thing clear," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "I don't care what your resume says. Around here, you prove yourself to me. And trust me, I don't make it easy." A few workers snickered from the desks. Carter smirked, clearly enjoying himself. Ava didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "Understood, sir." But Carter wasn't finished. "You see, in this office, I set the tone. I decide who makes it, and who doesn't. You'll do what I say, when I say it. And if you can't keep up, don't bother coming back tomorrow." The humiliation was deliberate. He wanted to show everyone that he was in control. But Ava simply met his gaze and said softly, I'll do my best, Mr. Carter." And just like that, the stage was set. Over the next week, Ava endured trial after trial. Carter made her the target of his cruel games. He mocked her clothes, sneering at her budget wardrobe. He questioned her intelligence, tossing back reports she had carefully prepared. He even made her fetch coffee for him during meetings, only to spit it out dramatically and declare it undrinkable. Each humiliation was delivered with a smirk, while the office watched in silence. And yet, Ava never snapped. She swallowed the insults, smiled politely, kept working diligently, carefully, quietly. But behind her calm eyes, a fire burned. Because Ava wasn't just enduring Carter's cruelty. She was watching, taking note, learning what kind of man he really was, and how he treated the people beneath him. And soon, his arrogance would lead him straight into a trap of his own making. By Friday afternoon, the office buzzed with gossip. Carter had put the new girl in her place. People whispered about how long she would last. Some pitied her, others avoided her. But Ava walked calmly through it all, her head high, her dignity intact. Because what they didn't know, what Carter definitely didn't know, was that Ava's last name wasn't just Williams. It was Ava Williams Sterling. And one day soon, Carter would learn the truth in a way that would shatter his pride forever. The following week began with a storm, not of rain, but of whispers. By now, Ava had been at Sterling Enterprises just long enough for the office to decide what they thought of her. To some, she was too quiet. To others, she was too soft. And to Daniel Carter, she was nothing more than an easy target to feed his hunger for control. On Monday morning, Ava arrived early, as always. Her blouse was freshly pressed, her notes carefully prepared for the day ahead. She had been assigned to help coordinate an operations review meeting, a chance for Carter to shine in front of regional directors. But Carter had other plans. When Ava entered the conference room, she found the table already set with folders, except hers. "Sir," she said gently, "I think my materials might be missing." Carter looked at her like she was a nuisance. "Oh, you don't need them," he said. "You're not here to contribute. You're here to take notes. That's all you're good for." The sting of laughter echoed from a few of the junior staff seated nearby. Ava lowered her eyes, scribbling quietly into her notepad. The directors walked in, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries. Carter turned on his charm immediately, his voice booming, his smile gleaming. He strutted around the room like a man on stage, throwing around buzzwords and corporate jargon as if they were magic spells. But then came the questions. "Mr. Carter," one director asked, flipping through a binder, "this logistics report seems incomplete. Who prepared this?" Carter didn't hesitate. She did. He pointed at Ava, his smirk sharp as a blade. "New girl, still learning how not to waste our time." The room chuckled uncomfortably. Ava's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. She hadn't even prepared that report, Carter had. But he needed someone to blame, and she was the perfect scapegoat. The directors frowned but moved on, unimpressed. Carter returned to the spotlight, as though nothing had happened. But Ava noticed something. The small details in the director's eyes. The way they glanced at Carter. The slight tightening of jaws. The flicker of doubt. They weren't laughing with him. They were watching. That evening, when the office emptied out, Ava stayed late to finish her work. She stacked files neatly, double-checked spreadsheets, and carefully organized Carter's schedule for the following day. But as she gathered her things, she overheard voices drifting from Carter's office. "She won't last 2 weeks," Carter said, his tone dripping with amusement. "Doesn't matter if she tries. She doesn't belong here. People like her, they're better off somewhere small. Somewhere beneath me." A laugh followed, one of his cronies agreeing, feeding his ego. Ava froze in the hallway, the words sinking like daggers. People like her. She knew what he meant. It wasn't just her newness. It wasn't just her quietness. It was her skin, her identity, everything she represented. For the first time since she started, Ava's composure cracked. She slipped into the stairwell, sinking onto the cold steps, her hands trembling. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Because deep down, she knew something Carter didn't. The more he tried to break her, the more he was building the stage for his own downfall. By midweek, Carter's humiliations escalated. On Wednesday morning, he called Ava out in front of the entire floor. "Williams," he barked. "Coffee, black, 2 sugars. And hurry up this time, I've got real work to do." Ava walked calmly to the break room, ignoring the snickers from nearby desks. She returned with the cup, placed it carefully on his desk. Carter took one sip, then spat it dramatically into the trash. Undrinkable. Do you ever get anything right? The room laughed. Ava simply bowed her head slightly and walked away. But in the shadows of cubicles, some employees frowned. Not everyone enjoyed the show. A young analyst named Marcus, who had been watching quietly all week, shook his head. That's not right, he muttered to his colleague. She's doing her job. He's just trying to crush her. His colleague whispered back, careful, speak up and you'll be next. So Marcus stayed silent, but his eyes never left Ava. Thursday came with another test. Carter deliberately gave Ava contradictory instructions for a report, then berated her when she followed them. Are you dense? He shouted across the office. This is the kind of incompetence that sinks companies. If you can't handle basic tasks, maybe this isn't the place for you. The words echoed, heavy and cruel. Ava stood frozen, every eye on her. Her heart hammered, but she refused to break. Instead, she looked Carter in the eye and said quietly, "Understood, sir. I'll fix it right away." Her calmness disarmed him for a split second. But then he sneered, waving her off like an insect. Yet behind her silence, the fire grew stronger. That night, Ava sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the city lights through her window. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. "How's your first week?" he asked. Ava hesitated before replying. She didn't tell him about Carter, didn't tell him about the cruelty. Instead, she wrote, "It's challenging, but I'm learning a lot." Jonathan Sterling replied simply, "Good. Remember, true leaders don't rise above their people, they rise with them." Ava smiled faintly, her father's words steadying her heart. Friday arrived like a storm cloud. Carter called a full staff meeting, striding into the room with the swagger of a king. He handed out performance reports, praising some, mocking others. When he reached Ava, he paused dramatically, holding her report high. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, "a case study in failure." He slapped the report onto the table. "This is what happens when we lower our standards. Sloppy work, missed deadlines, no initiative. Frankly, I'm embarrassed she works in my department." The laughter was crueler this time, harsher. Ava felt the sting, her chest tightening. But she also noticed Marcus. He wasn't laughing. He was glaring at Carter with disgust. And she wasn't the only one who saw it. A few other employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The tide was beginning to turn. As the meeting ended, Carter leaned close to Ava, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Do yourself a favor, Williams. Quick before I make you regret staying." Ava met his eyes, calm and steady. "No, sir, I think I'll stay." For the first time, Carter blinked, thrown off by the quiet steel in her tone. Because Ava wasn't just staying. She was waiting. Waiting for the perfect moment. The moment the tables would turn. The following Monday, the office atmosphere was different. It wasn't loud laughter or cruel jokes that filled the air this time, it was whispers. Soft, cautious, buzzing whispers. Employees had begun to notice the pattern. How every mistake in the department somehow landed on Ava. How Carter singled her out, twisting her every effort into failure. It wasn't just bad luck. It was deliberate. But Carter, blind with arrogance, couldn't see the change. He still strutted through the floor as if the entire company revolved around him. That morning, he called Ava into his office. "Williams," he barked, not even looking up from his computer. "I'm putting you on presentation duty for Friday's quarterly review." Ava blinked. "The quarterly review? With the board?" "Yes," Carter said smugly. "You'll prepare the presentation, polish it, and then hand it to me. I'll deliver it, of course. You're just background." Ava tilted her head slightly. "And if it goes wrong?" Carter's smirk widened. "Then it's on you. But if it goes right, well, naturally, it'll be my brilliance they applaud." Ava nodded, her expression calm. "Understood." Inside, her pulse quickened. Because this wasn't just another assignment. This was the moment she had been waiting for. For the next few days, Ava worked silently, staying late, poring over financial data, logistics reports, and projections. She built a presentation so sharp, so airtight, that even Carter couldn't poke holes in it. But she added something extra. Hidden within the slides, in plain sight, were metrics Carter had neglected. Areas of inefficiency, instances of overspending, patterns of mismanagement, all tied directly to Carter's decisions. It wasn't sabotage. It was the truth. And the truth had been waiting for the right stage. On Thursday night, Carter swaggered past her desk, glancing at the near-finished presentation. "Not bad," he said with a mocking grin. "Of course, I'll make it great. My delivery, my charm, that's what sells to the board. Not numbers." Ava smiled faintly. "Of course, sir." As Carter walked away, she whispered to herself, "We'll see." Friday arrived. The boardroom gleamed with polished wood and glass. High-backed leather chairs surrounded the table, filled one by one with senior directors, executives, and advisors. Carter adjusted his tie, flashing his trademark grin. His confidence was unshakable. This was his chance to shine, to climb another rung on the corporate ladder. Ava entered quietly, carrying the presentation files. She placed them neatly at the head of the table. "Williams," Carter whispered sharply, "stay in the back. Don't speak unless spoken to." She nodded, stepping aside. But her eyes lingered on the room, especially the empty chair at the far end of the table. The one reserved for the company's founder and owner, her father. The meeting began. Carter launched into the presentation with booming energy, clicking through slides as though each was a personal achievement. "Under my leadership," he declared, "Sterling Enterprises has continued to thrive. Profits are stable, expansion is on the horizon, and our operations remain efficient and strong." The directors nodded politely, though some brows furrowed at the data. Slide by slide, Carter talked, exaggerated, boasted. He skimmed past the critical numbers Ava had carefully included, glossing over them with a wave of his hand. But the directors noticed. "Mr. Carter," one of them interrupted, pointing at a bar chart. "This overspending in logistics, can you explain this pattern? It seems to have increased significantly in the past 2 quarters." Carter's smile flickered. He glanced at Ava, then back at the board. "Minor fluctuations," he said quickly. "Nothing to worry about. Likely just clerical errors from my junior staff." The directors exchanged looks. Ava stayed silent, calm, watching. Another director leaned forward. "And these inefficiencies in distribution, this is under your department, correct?" Carter swallowed, tugging at his collar. "Yes, but, again, these things happen. What matters is my overall leadership, my ability to guide this ship forward." The room was colder now, less impressed. And then, the door opened. Every head turned. In walked Jonathan Sterling, the founder, the owner, the man who commanded respect without a word. Carter's eyes widened. He hadn't expected him. Jonathan took his seat at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping the room. Finally, it rested on Ava, standing quietly at the back. He gave the smallest nod. Ava's heart steadied. The moment was near. Carter straightened, trying to recover. "Ah, Mr. Sterling, what an honor. I was just presenting the quarterly review. As you'll see, under my guidance, the company remains in excellent shape." Jonathan said nothing, only gestured for him to continue. Carter stumbled through the rest of the slides, his voice losing its earlier confidence. The board pressed him harder, asking questions he couldn't answer. His excuses grew weaker, his charm slipping like water through clenched fists. Finally, Jonathan raised a hand. "That's enough, Mr. Carter." The room fell silent. Jonathan turned, his eyes settling on Ava. "Ms. Williams," he said firmly, "I believe you prepared this presentation. Would you care to explain these numbers to the board?" Gasps filled the room. Carter's face drained of color. Ava stepped forward, her hand steady as she took the clicker. "Of course, sir." And for the first time, she spoke, not as an assistant, not as Carter's scapegoat, but as someone who carried the truth. Ava took a steady breath, her hands calm as she clicked back to the slides Carter had glossed over. "Directors, as you can see here," she began, her voice clear, steady, professional. "Logistics costs have spiked by nearly 20% in the last 2 quarters. These aren't clerical errors, as was suggested. They're systemic failures, poor vendor management, unnecessary overtime, and delayed shipments." The room leaned in. She had their attention. Furthermore, she continued, flipping to another chart, distribution inefficiencies have led to missed deadlines and client dissatisfaction. These issues weren't reported accurately in previous meetings, which is why the numbers may come as a surprise today. The directors exchanged uneasy glances. Carter shifted uncomfortably in his chair, sweat beginning to gather at his temples. One director spoke up. "Ms. Williams, how do you know all this?" Ava paused. Her eyes flicked toward her father, Jonathan Sterling, who gave the slightest nod of approval. She smiled faintly. Because I did the work. I compiled the data. I sat with employees, combed through invoices, and gathered the numbers myself. The board murmured. Respect flickered in their eyes. Carter slammed a hand on the table. This is ridiculous. She's just a junior assistant. She doesn't have the authority to. Jonathan's voice cut him off, sharp as a blade. Sit down, Mr. Carter. The room went silent. Carter froze. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not here, not in this boardroom. Jonathan turned to Ava. Please, continue. Ava clicked to the final slide. And yet, she said softly, these problems aren't permanent. They can be fixed, with leadership that values transparency, teamwork, and integrity. The words hung heavy in the room. Carter laughed nervously. Oh, come on, you're all seriously listening to her. She's nothing more than. Jonathan rose from his chair. Slowly, deliberately. Enough. His voice carried the weight of authority, the kind that needed no volume to command silence. He looked directly at Carter. You've mocked, belittled, and humiliated this young woman since the day she walked in here. You treated her as though she was beneath you. But today, you'll learn the truth. Jonathan stepped aside, his gaze shifting to Ava. Directors, meet my daughter, Ava Sterling. Gasps erupted around the table. Papers rustled. Chairs creaked. Carter's jaw dropped. What? No, that's not possible. But Ava stood tall, her eyes meeting his. It is. I didn't take this job for recognition or prestige. I came here to see how this company was being run, not from the top floor, but from the ground level. To understand what employees endure every day. She stepped closer to Carter, her voice calm but edged with steel. And what I found was you. The silence was suffocating. Carter stammered, desperate. I didn't know. I mean, I was just joking around. You can't. Ava's eyes narrowed. Humiliation isn't a joke. Disrespect isn't a joke. And abuse of power is never a joke. Jonathan's voice boomed. You've embarrassed this company, Carter. You've poisoned its culture, and effective immediately, you are terminated. Carter's face turned pale. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Security stepped forward. No, please, Mr. Sterling, you can't do this. I've given years to this company. You need me. Jonathan's expression hardened. No, what this company needs is integrity. And leaders who lift others up, not tear them down. Leave, now. Security escorted him out, his protests echoing uselessly down the hall. The board sat in stunned silence. Some looked ashamed, others relieved. But all eyes turned to Ava. She stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding. This company isn't just about profit margins and quarterly reports, she said firmly. It's about people. The way we treat them determines not just our culture, but our success. If we build on fear, the foundation crumbles. But if we build on respect, dignity, and teamwork, then we thrive. The directors nodded, slowly at first, then firmly. Applause broke out, not the shallow kind, but genuine, grateful, and moved. Employees peered in through the glass doors, whispering, their eyes wide. The truth was spreading already. And Ava knew, something had shifted forever. Later that evening, as the office emptied, Ava walked past Carter's old office. She paused, remembering every insult, every humiliation, every time he tried to break her. But she didn't feel bitterness. She felt clarity. Because Carter hadn't just revealed his cruelty, he had revealed her strength. And in the end, it wasn't revenge that defined her victory. It was justice. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never mistreat those you think have no power. Because one day, the tables will turn. And when they do, it won't just be about justice. It'll be about truth. And truth always wins. If you believe in truth, justice and storytelling that matters, you're in the right place. Subscribe to this channel, turn on your notification bell and be part of our community for more exclusive and insightful contents on these salient topics.